The G20 Summit in New Delhi continues, and there is a collective sigh of relief here as far as the Indian officials, the Indian government is concerned. They have managed to do it. They have got a breakthrough. A New Delhi declaration is now official. It has been adopted. It is public as well. 83 paragraphs, and in the words of the External Affairs Minister as well as the Sherpa of the G20 for India, Amitabh Kant, there has been complete unanimity on all 83 paragraphs. So consensus has emerged at the end of what have been very difficult and challenging negotiations. The External Affairs Minister, in a response to my colleague Parikshit Luthra's question, did acknowledge the fact that it was the emerging countries, the emerging economies that have come out in support to try and ensure that we got this consensus. Now, as far as the fine print goes, when we talk about Ukraine and Russia, of course, the declaration does condemn the war, but it doesn't talk about Russia and Ukraine beyond the aspects of food, fuel and fertilizer security. Now, on other substantive issues, whether it's the reforms of the multilateral development banks, or it is crypto regulations or climate finance, there was progress made and consensus has emerged on each one of those issues, including, of course, the big one, which is the announcement that came in earlier this morning, and that is the inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20, something that India has pushed for as it continues to speak for the voice of the Global South. Joining me now for their view on what this means, our eminent panel of guests. We've got with us Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow Chair in the US-India Policy Studies, or CSIS. Also with us, Ambassador K.C. Singh. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And Zhong Zului, Morris R. Greenberg Fellow of China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Ambassador Singh, let me start by asking you, there was a question mark, great degree of uncertainty on whether consensus would be achieved, but it has happened. There is a New Delhi declaration in place, 83 paragraphs long.
Well, yes, it's a great success as far as that is concerned, because there was a question mark that would the Western countries, would the G7 accept any deletions from the Bali declaration, but it seems there's some kind of a compromise which has been worked out, which is not bad. Because if you recall, the US National Security Advisor briefing about what President Biden was going to take up had only two issues. He said Ukraine and multilateral development banks. So the Americans came with this in their pocket, but it's very difficult to say, but there might have been some behind the scenes understanding with the Russians. Today, the Russians, in fact, did something provocative, because there was an election which was undertaken in the occupied areas today. So maybe there is something afoot which is not visible, because to get the grain deal going, to get the fertilizer, fuel prices under control, the Russians will have to be brought on board. Now, whether something is afoot behind the scenes where we are moving towards probably later some ceasefire is not clear. But at the moment, the very fact that the G7 countries have accepted a compromise is a positive sign. And therefore, G20 can go back to its agenda, which has accrued over a period of time. As you know, it started in 2008 as a leaders group. The banking crisis created it. So from macro finance, after the Paris Agreement, Paris Climate Change Agreement, it went on to climate change, environment, and then with COVID, health came in. And with Ukraine, the three other things came in, which was food, energy, and global and fertilizers. So all these issues then are addressed once the Ukraine thing, there's a compromise on that. Well, of course, I would say that there is, the declaration is extremely aspirational. We may not see as much progress as quickly. As you know, even after the Paris Agreement, which was Obama's kind of final act before he transferred his presidency, we know what Trump did. The Americans withdrew, then COVID came, and then the climate issue was completely forgotten. So many of these things may appear as a great advance today, but I will call them aspirational. The numbers they're talking about seem very ambitious, trillions of dollars being brought in over the next few years, because so far the commitments given by G7 have not been kept on climate finance. And then there is, of course, the question of China. The fact that AU has come in and nobody has resisted it is because it's understood that China has been left the ground open in Africa and the developing countries, where the Belt and Road Initiative has been pushed, because the multilateral lending, the banks have not really thrown their money into the game. And I think Americans have realized this, and that's why even Quad was talking about it, that we have to look at developmental finance. You can't counter China simply by talk. And I think bringing AU into G20 is one such step, and also a recognition that you have to address the problems of the developing countries and the global south, particularly as far as infrastructure is concerned. And I think this is a positive step, but what is going to be the pace, we don't know. It'll depend on, how relations between you and China move, how Ukraine war moves, what Russia does in the future. It all depends on that.
Yes, but for now, at least, there is a declaration that we do have in place. Jayant Krishna, let me bring you in on that. We've just been looking at what's different between the Bali Declaration and the New Delhi Declaration, even though the foreign minister did say that, look, Bali is Bali, New Delhi is New Delhi. On the issue of Ukraine, Ukraine was mentioned 5 times in the Bali Declaration. It's mentioned 4 times in the New Delhi Declaration. Cryptocurrency, another big focus area. Crypto mentioned 4 times in the Bali Declaration, mentioned 12 times in the New Delhi Declaration. As the finance minister also pointed out, this is an area that requires global cooperation and global regulation, and there has been a move forward towards that. Jayant Krishna, your first thoughts? This is certainly not an area where India would have liked to create history by becoming the first G20 presidency and the first G20 summit that would not have had a joint communique. So from that point of view, a huge sigh of relief that we do have a New Delhi Declaration in place. But outside of that also, as we heard from the Sherpa, several substantive issues being taken forward, lots of meat there in terms of areas. Of course, we do now need to see tangible next steps. But overall, your big takeaway?
So I think, Shireen, I've been on multiple TV channels for the last 2 days talking about expectations from G20 Leaders Summit, been writing op-eds, and I'm sure so many other people. And so, it's almost like the entire wish list that we had is addressed in some form or the other in the Delhi Declaration. And given the fact till yesterday, although the Sherpa Amitabh Kant did mention that the draft is ready, but the fact is there were a lot of apprehensions whether China would agree, whether Russia would agree, and so on and so forth, or somebody would, scuttle the entire thing. But I think it has seen the light of the day, which is very, very assuring and reassuring. And especially on the war, the Russia-Ukraine war front, if you look at, I think there's some worthwhile mention there. And the fact is, there's not even a single outlier country which has not signed or has, expressed reservations. So, I mean, they've talked about that this is not an era of war at all. They've talked about, every country respecting the international law and respecting the territorial integrity and refrain from aggression and so on and so forth. These are very, very positive steps, because there was every apprehension that Russia itself and backed by China and with the backing of China would not let that happen. So that's very, very good. I think on climate financing, I have just laid my hands on the document. I have not gone through it, but from whatever I've watched on TV channels or while as a panelist on other channels, I mean, I do get a feeling that there is something tangible on how the climate funding would happen. The past record has not been good at all. The Paris Accord, other than what Trump did, whatever commitments various nations had given, had promised, though many of them have not seen the light of the day. If we look at that $100 billion of climate financing, largely by the global north to global south, very, very small fraction of that has actually fructified. So I think past record has not been good at all. But climate is clearly an emergency. I mean, this is not something, which would knock our doors in future, and our future generations, our children would feel. We have seen it, how, the worst, the hottest summer months in the past, in the history of mankind, or at least the mankind. I think we have seen as many things, the forest fires in the US, in Germany, in Australia, and elsewhere. So I think this is something I would go into the fine print and see. I hope there is something, the fundamental issue there remains that who pays for climate changes and who funds it. The general expectation has been that the global north should fund, especially the climate, imperatives in global south. So I think that's very, very good. They've talked about ocean economy. They've talked about One Future Alliance, which was India's recommendation, seeing the light of the day. Also, they've talked about, the sustainable agriculture and the future security, and with a special focus on nutrition. This is extremely encouraging, And also the financial institution, financial inclusion they have talked about, but the multilateral financial institutions reforms, I still have to see that what are the elements. Like developing countries have been wanting that, the rate of interest should fall, should go down, and funding should happen in local currency rather than in dollars, and the total size of the kitty should go up. So one doesn't know to what extent these issues are addressed, but purely from a coverage point of view, it is fantastic, 39 documents, 73 outcomes, 83 paras. I think it's a fantastic thing. So a victory of, more than the prime minister. I think it's the diplomats who have really worked behind the scenes. I think it's fantastic. And in some way, Shireen, I feel it reinforces India's position as a voice of the global south, and also as a country, which has worthwhile credentials to work as some kind of a bridge between the global north and global south.
Oh, absolutely. I think that certainly would be the feeling today within the Indian camp, within the Indian officials who have been burning the midnight oil quite literally to get this done. But let me bring Zong Uzun Lee to the conversation as well. Thank you very much for joining us. President Xi's absence, of course, was something that Indian officials did not want to be drawn into. But at the end of the day, there is consensus and there is a declaration. How would you read India's G20 presidency, the outcomes that have been arrived at, and the way forward?
Thank you, Shireen, for having me. I think the fact that the Indian presidency of G20 achieved consensus actually one day ahead of time amid a lot of global questions with regard to what extent this may not necessarily reach an agreement. So just by that, on the very first point, I would say it's quite a success. And in particular, at least countries were able to reach agreement and modify the tones with regard to disagreement on how to address Russia and the war in Ukraine. And on top of that, the agreement with the encompassing topic covering from crypto to climate financing. And in addition to that, on the sideline of this G20 meeting, the United States and the Middle East and India is supposed to get together, is going to achieve a new development project in terms of undersea cables and port and transport corridor to strengthen India's connection with the Middle East as an example of providing an alternative to China's influence in the global south and in global south developing countries and the Middle East. So I think a lot of these are suggesting that this is quite a successful summit already.
Right. Yes, the issue of climate finance, as we just heard there from Jayant Krishna, of course, continues to be a big one. We are in the midst of a climate emergency. But Ambassador Singh, let me come back to you now. On the bilaterals that have been happening on the sidelines of the G20 Summit, and there have been many, but the big one, of course, between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, picking up from where they left off in June in D.C. when the Prime Minister visited the U.S. There's also a confirmation now coming in from the U.S. side on this big railway project between the US, India, UAE and Saudi. The significance of the build-up on momentum as far as the India-US bilateral is concerned on most issues that were earlier taken up, whether it was critical and emerging technologies or now this new one as far as this big railway development project is concerned, a four-way deal.
Look, firstly, when summits take place very close to each other, because Prime Minister was in Washington in June, you really don't have that many new issues. So it's more of follow-up. It's a stock taking. And that's why on the GEHAL fighter jet deal, they are saying the US Congress has already approved it. So similarly with the drones, that India has already given a letter to them, etc. So it's really a follow-up on that. There are not that many new things. I didn't see anything specific coming out on the nuclear cooperation. I thought when you talk of clean energy, so on and so forth, there'll be some movement on that. But that probably is stuck on the Indian side because we've got legislative issues. Now, coming to the Fourway, the quadrilateral agreement for the maritime rail link, I think there is a stumbling block. And the stumbling block is Israel, because you can't have a link all the way to the Mediterranean without the line going through Israel. Until the Saudis and the Israelis, their problems are sorted out, which aren't so far, because UAE has managed to sort out its relationship with Israel, but the Saudis have imposed conditions on what the Israelis need to do vis-a-vis the Palestinians and so on and so forth. And I don't think that is sorted out as yet. Until that is done, I don't see the Saudis accepting it. And just simply having it run between UAE and Saudi Arabia is not enough. If you have to go back to the Red Sea and again take the Suez Canal, then why have a railway and a maritime link? You might as well put the things on a ship from here and send it by the maritime route. So it doesn't, it's not very clear to me exactly what's going to be the role, because the maritime rule, you can say that Suez is a choke point, but then you have to have a clean movement of the goods all the way to the Mediterranean, which at the moment without Israel is not possible.
Right. Yes, those are the questions that require answers at this point in time. But Jayant Krishna, speaking of bilaterals, Rishi Sunak here as well as part of the G20. And of course, the negotiations still underway to try and iron out the differences as far as the UK-India FTA are concerned. It is likely that we are in the last lap of those negotiations. What's the expectation on that front?
So, Shireen, previously I was the CEO of UK India Business Council, and during we had pushed on both sides the FTA going forward, and and a lot of meetings have happened. If you just go by the number crunching, the number of interactions, the number of deliberations which have happened, I would say negotiations which have happened in the last few months, you rekindle your hope that it will happen. I personally would think anywhere between 4 to 6 months' time, the FTA should get signed, if not earlier, because now there are only, I'm told, just a few stumbling blocks which are left. Everything else is there. I think one more thing in the UK-India bilateral, which I think on the Indian side must be taken up on the education front. Still Indian government does not recognize many of the master's degrees. So the mutual recognition of degrees treaty, which happened between France and India a few years ago, also has to be extended between UK and India. I think that's what the Indian side, I don't know whether that bilateral has happened or happening, but I think we must take it up with the right intensity. So I believe, and now with Rishi Sunak at the helm of affairs, I think, there appears to be a good chemistry between the two prime ministers, and both our countries have a shared history and so on and so forth, good and bad both. But I think there's a lot of mutuality in the relationship, and I'm sure FTA is a matter of time. That's it.
Yes, it certainly seems like we are heading towards close now as far as the India-UK FTA is concerned. But Ambassador Singh, let me ask you, what would be the big takeaway for you as far as the G20 presidency is concerned? We are, of course, handing over presidency now to Brazil. This has been something that India has showcased. I mean, everyone that I've spoken to so far is very clear about the fact that they've never seen anything quite like this. 200 meetings across 60 different cities, and many believe that perhaps we're not going to see anything like this again either. What, to your mind, is the big significance, the big takeaway, the big implication of India's G20 presidency?
Is that question to me, Shireen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Shireen. So I think, as you rightly said, 200 meetings across 60 cities. I think India took, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, it took the G20 presidency very, very seriously. And in the process, in the last 10 months, the kind of work which has happened, various working groups spread all over the country, I think it reinforces India's position in the world. It also showcases India as a global power, and more importantly, as somebody who's the who's the voice of the global South. China sometimes claims, but I doubt whether China even represents global South. For one simple reason, if you look at many of the parameters, many of the economic indicators there, be it the per capita GDP, per capita income, or Human Development Index, they're way ahead. So I don't think purely from a operating realities point of view, they can really represent the voice of the global South, which India has emerged as one. So I think it's a good thing, and I mean, a lot of people, a lot of major countries used to see India on the sidelines, but I think the leadership of G20 has given a lot of opportunity, and not only abroad. I think it has improved Prime Minister Modi's clout in India as well. The domestic clout has also taken an uplift. That there is no doubt about that at all, I think. And I think purely from a Indian perspective, if you look at, I think some broad agreement. Obviously, it's a matter of detail, and lot of the actual action would depend upon how we act on the new Delhi Declaration. The many things which are mentioned there. But I think some movement on climate financing, something else on food security and sustainable agriculture with nutrition. I think these things, and even the reforms in the multilateral financial institutions, these are very important. I don't know whether it's there in the declaration or not, but something which India has been asking for, that, you have the global supply chains, but there is if you really need to boost global trade, it's very, very important to map these supply chains and create a repository, at least of major countries, major companies, and major product categories. Have these global repositories made and made available online to people, so that more and more companies, especially from developing countries like India, are able to participate in that, and including MSMEs. So I think it's very, very important, and the inclusion of African Union, to my mind, has been extremely, extremely good. And one thing which should not be lost sight of, I think India has been able to showcase as to how it has used digital public infrastructure very, very successfully, especially during the COVID time, and reducing the leakages that used to happen in funds transfer and so on and so forth, and how by embracing this and sharing best practices worldwide, how we could reduce the digital divide and have a seamless delivery of service delivery of public services and so on and so forth. I think India's software capabilities were always known. We have a very, very huge share of the entire addressable outsourcing market world over. Almost half of it is by India. But I think DPI success has really, in many developed countries also, DPI has not been leveraged to an extent as we have leveraged. So I think that showcasing has gone a very, very long way. Would go a long way, and I'm sure more countries can learn from it. And I'm sure in the process there'll be some learnings for us as well.
Ambassador Singh, just hold that thought, sir. We have that big announcement coming in on the West Asia rail project. So let's just listen in and get an official confirmation on what has been discussed.
राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन के साथ इस इवेंट को को-चेयर करते हुए मुझे हार्दिक खुशी हो रही है। आज हम सब ने एक महत्वपूर्ण और ऐतिहासिक समझौता संपन्न होते हुए देखा है। आने वाले समय में यह भारत, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन का प्रभावी माध्यम होगा। यह पूरे विश्व में कनेक्टिविटी और विकास को सस्टेनेबल दिशा प्रदान करेगा। मैं हिज एक्सेलेंसी राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन, हिज रॉयल हाइनेस क्राउन प्रिंस एंड प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोहम्मद बिन सलमान, हिज रॉयल हाइनेस राष्ट्रपति शेख मोहम्मद बिन जायद, हिज एक्सेलेंसी राष्ट्रपति मैक्रो, हिज एक्सेलेंसी चांसलर सोल्च, हर एक्सेलेंसी प्रधानमंत्री मेलोनी और हर एक्सेलेंसी प्रेसिडेंट वॉन डेर लेयन, इन सबको इस इनिशिएटिव के लिए मैं बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर मानव सभ्यता के विकास का मूल आधार है। भारत ने अपनी विकास यात्रा में इस विषय को सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता दी है। फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के साथ साथ सोशल, डिजिटल तथा फाइनेंशियल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में अभूतपूर्व पैमाने पर निवेश हो रहा है। इससे हम एक विकसित भारत की मजबूत नींव रख रहे हैं। हमने ग्लोबल साउथ के अनेक देशों में एक विश्वसनीय पार्टनर के रूप में एनर्जी, रेलवे, वाटर, टेक्नोलॉजी पार्क्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स इंप्लीमेंट किए हैं। इन प्रयासों में हमने डिमांड ड्रिवन और ट्रांसपेरेंट अप्रोच पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया है। पीजीआईआई के माध्यम से हम ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गैप को कम करने में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, भारत कनेक्टिविटी को क्षेत्रीय सीमाओं में नहीं मापता। सभी क्षेत्रों के साथ कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ाना भारत की मुख्य प्राथमिकता है। हमारा मानना है कि कनेक्टिविटी विभिन्न देशों के बीच आपसी व्यापार ही नहीं, आपसी विश्वास भी बढ़ाने का स्रोत है। कनेक्टिविटी इनिशिएटिव्स को प्रमोट करते हुए कुछ मूलभूत सिद्धांतों का सुनिश्चित किया जाना महत्वपूर्ण है, जैसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय नॉर्म्स, रूल्स तथा लॉज का पालन, सभी देशों की संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान, डेट बर्डन की जगह फाइनेंशियल वायबिलिटी को बढ़ावा देना और पर्यावरण के सभी मापदंडों का पालन करना। आज जब हम कनेक्टिविटी का इतना बड़ा इनिशिएटिव ले रहे हैं, तब हम आने वाली पीढ़ियों के सपनों के विस्तार के बीज बो रहे हैं। मैं इस ऐतिहासिक अवसर पर सभी लीडर्स को मैं बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Thank you, sir. India and the United States of America co-chair this initiative, and now, as the co-chair, I invite the President of the United States for his remarks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, all my colleagues. This is, someone once said in a similar domestic action that was positive, this is a big deal. This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 Summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future of that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And the This afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality. Economic corridors. You're going to hear that phrase more than once, I expect, over the next decade. Economic corridors. As we work to address infrastructure gaps across low and middle income countries, we need to maximize the impacts of our investments. That's why a few months ago I announced that the United States will work with our partners to invest in economic corridors. In practice, it means we're focusing on regional infrastructure projects that deliver results across multiple countries and in multiple sectors. And today I'm proud to announce that we've finalized a historic agreement for a new India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. As a key part of this corridor, we're going to invest in ships and rail that extends from India all the way to Europe, connected by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. Bridging ports across 2 continents, unlocking endless opportunities, including making it far easier to trade, export clean energy, expand access to reliable, clean electricity, lay cables that will connect communities and secure a stable internet, contributing to a more stable, more prosperous, and integrated Middle East. And I want to thank the sponsors. And I particularly want to thank Prime Minister Modi and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and President von der Leyen and the European Commissions. And since he's not speaking today, I wanted to, well, maybe he is speaking today. I had a note he wasn't speaking. At any rate, I'm going to stop there. In the sub-Saharan Africa, we're working in a private-public partnership as well to invest in a trans-African corridor. That includes a new partner, the European Union. President von der Leyen, thank you for making this very possible. Together, as part of this corridor, we're going to invest in a new rail line that will extend from the western port in Angola to the DRC, to Zambia, and ultimately the Indian Ocean. It's a project that's about far from just laying tracks. It's about creating jobs, increasing trade, strengthening supply chains, boosting connectivity, laying foundations that will strengthen commerce and food security for people across multiple countries. This is a game-changing regional investment, and both of these are huge, huge steps forward. But they're far from the only ones. We're continuing to make big investments in infrastructure around the world. That includes a solar energy site, an insulin manufacturing facility, and electricity project right here in India. We're continuing to develop economic corridors across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And together with our partners, we're working to mobilize the trillions of investment needed to close infrastructure gaps around the world, including the formation of a new investor forum that the United States will host in a couple weeks. Let me close with this. The world stands at an inflection point in history, a point where decisions we make today are going to affect the course of our future, all of our futures for decades to come. A point where our investments are more critical than ever. So together, let's continue to work as one to seize this moment in history and maximize our collective investments, to find new partners, to unlock new capital, because when we invest in low and middle income countries, all countries benefit. When we invest in emerging economies, all economies benefit. And when we invest in the future of people anywhere, people everywhere benefit. So I want to thank you again for being here. I look forward to working with all of you, and I'm going to turn it back to the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. We now invite the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for his remarks.
أصحاب الفخامة والسمو والمعالي الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني اليوم نجتمع في هذا البلد الصديق لتوقيع مذكرة تفاهم بشأن مشروع ممر اقتصادي بين الهند والشرق الأوسط وأوروبا، وذلك تتويجا لما عملنا عليه سويا خلال الأشهر الماضية لبلورة الأسس التي بنيت عليه هذه المذكرة، بما يحقق مصالح مشتركة لدولنا من خلال تعزيز الترابط الاقتصادي وما ينعكس إيجابا على شركائنا في الدول الأخرى والاقتصاد العالمي بصورة عامة. ويسهم هذا المشروع في تطوير وتأهيل البنى التحتية التي تشمل سكك حديدية وربط الموانئ وزيادة مرور السلع والخدمات وتعزيز التبادل التجاري بين الأطراف المعنية ومد خطوط الأنابيب لتصدير واستيراد الكهرباء والهيدروجين لتعزيز أمن إمدادات الطاقة العالمي بالإضافة إلى كابلات لنقل البيانات من خلال شبكة عابرة الحدود ذات كفاءة وموثوقية عالية. كما تدعم هذه المذكرة جهود تطوير الطاقة النظيفة وسيساهم تنفيذها في توليد فرص عمل جديدة ونوعية ومكاسب طويلة الأمد على امتداد الممرات العبور لجميع الأطراف. الحضور الكرام، أن تحقيق ما اتفقنا عليه في هذه المذكرة يتطلب الاستمرار في الجهود التي بذلناها والبدء الفوري في تطوير الآليات اللازمة لتنفيذها وفق الإطار الزمني الذي تم الاتفاق عليه. وفي الختام لا يفوتني في هذه المناسبة.
In conclusion, I'd like to commend the PGII launched by President Biden with the participation of Saudi Arabia in $20 billion. We look forward to the integration of the initiative and the Economic Corridor project, which is announced in this meeting. I would like to thank those who worked with us to reach this founding step to establish this important economic corridor. My best regard to you all.
Thank you, Your Highness. May I now invite the President of the European Commission for her remarks, please.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, it's been 2 years since we launched PGII, a joint vision by the world's leading economies to invest in the infrastructure that low and middle income countries need. And 2 years on, more large-scale projects are seeing the light, and we are presenting 2 of them today. First, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. This is nothing but historic. It will be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf, and Europe, with a rail link that will make trade between India and Europe 40% faster, with an electricity cable and a clean hydrogen pipeline to foster clean energy trade between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, with a high-speed data cable to link some of the most innovative digital ecosystems in the world and create business opportunities all along the way. These are state-of-the-art connections for the world of tomorrow, faster, shorter, cleaner. This corridor is much more than just a railway or a cable. It is a green and digital bridge across continents and civilizations. And this is also the spirit of the second project we announced today, the Trans-African Corridor.
Well, that is Ursula von der Leyen there, along with the other leaders, announcing the big agreement. This is what we were talking about. It is now official. India, Middle East, Europe Connectivity Corridor, a historic and first of its kind initiative that focuses on cooperation on connectivity and infrastructure that involves India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, EU, France, Italy, Germany, and the US. Ambassador K.C. Singh and Jayant Krishna still with us. Ambassador Singh, we were talking about infrastructure just before we got this official announcement coming in from the global leaders here on this India, Middle East, Europe Connectivity Corridor. Now that you've heard from them, what do you make of it?
No, you can see that it's very visionary, and you got China. They've got China in mind, because the investment forum, which now US is hosting in 2 weeks, is going to become a very big driver of creating infrastructure all over the world. That's what President Biden is saying. So these 2 that we are seeing now are only the first 2 projects. It's interesting that it's more than a railway link. They are talking of a green digital connection. And of course, they talked of Jordan and Israel. So obviously the line has to go through them. And Saudis, it seems, are not putting up any resistance to that, because the line is going into Jordan. So they're not dealing with Israel. So it goes into Jordan first, and then it goes to Israel and Mediterranean. So I think it's fantastically envisioned. It says one didn't realize that it'll bring down the time by 40% for sending goods from India to Europe, because the ships obviously travel slower than the railways. and the other one which is across Africa, that explains why EU's come in, that explains why this is being done, because otherwise Africa had been just left to the Chinese. So if there is a link all the way from Angola through Zimbabwe to the Indian Ocean, it opens up the heart of the African continent. And that is where there is land for food. That is where there are resources which will be available to the world. And that's a large, a huge continent which is underdeveloped and underused or underexploited. And therefore the countries will benefit and the rest of the world should benefit. So it's extremely visionary, and it's great we got Saudi Arabia and UAE. Unfortunately, we heard the interpretation a bit late, but the Saudi Crown Prince has already contributed $30 billion, I think, to the American fund. And you can see that once the big money bags are there, the initial funding comes in, then it gets the ball rolling. I'd say it's really a visionary approach.
We seem to sing. Hello. Hello.
Most about this initiative and all the activities we speak about today is already set, so I will not repeat it, just mentioning two questions. The first is we have to be active that these things can happen, and this is for me that we then have to also work on the infrastructure, the institutions that can work on financing, and for this I think it is also important to make the work of the World Bank successful. Germany will contribute an additional 305 million euro of hybrid capital to the World Bank, and this is one of the aspects which is a side of the activity here. We also try to work with Africa, and the compact with Africa will convene in Berlin in November, also as a sign of creating infrastructure, developing economy, all the things we are together here.
Thank you, Excellency. May I now invite the Prime Minister of Japan for his remarks, please.
はい、ありがとうございます。PGII に関するサイドイベント。
The holding of this side event on Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. On the occasion of the G7 Hiroshima Summit in May this year, as the G7 chair, Japan hosted a PGII meeting inviting private businesses for the first time, which was attended by leaders of G7 and partner countries. Japan is delivering various transport infrastructure development projects, including the construction of Delhi Metro here in the city to support economic development of partner countries. Going forward, we want to take this effort a step further to expand the scope of cooperation to wider areas, including supply chains, to link people together by strengthening connectivity. We also intend to work on building industrial value chains in the whole of Bay of Bengal. The Road Network Connectivity Improvement Plan and other northeastern regional development initiatives in India will be organically linked with the Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Belt Initiative, or a Big B, that we are working on with Bangladesh. Furthermore, the Japan-ASEAN Comprehensive Connectivity Initiative that Japan announced at the ASEAN-related summit meeting will strengthen connectivity in a variety of areas, including transport infrastructure, digital connectivity, maritime cooperation, supply chains, electricity, as well as human and knowledge connectivity. In this way, Japan will continue to lead the effort for tangible implementation of PGII. To do that, partnership with diverse actors who subscribe to its principles is essential. For the promotion of PGII, I call on everyone gathered here once again to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. May I now invite the Prime Minister of Italy for her remarks.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, when we launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment just over a year ago, we committed to building better infrastructure for better future in low and middle income nations. We committed to cooperate with these nations with an equal, non-predatory approach to create new opportunities and prosperity. Today's launch of the new economic corridor between India and the Middle East and Europe goes precisely in this direction and is a milestone in strengthening global interconnections. And that is why I want to thank Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, and all the others, Ursula von der Leyen and all the others who made it possible, for it's a very important thing. This will scale up our economy's growth, opening enormous potential for mutual benefits in the business sector. Obviously, Italy is ready to play a decisive role in this process, also through the unique expertise of Italian companies in the maritime and railway sector. And we want to contribute in building bridges between the Mediterranean and the Indo-Pacific, also in the fields of energy and digital connectivity via Africa and the Arabian Gulf. In the energy sector, we can work in different fields, including the production and transport of green hydrogen from the Middle East to the Mediterranean. We also support the European Commission on the Helmet project, a high-voltage submarine electricity interconnection that will link Italy to Tunisia. We are working to strengthen digital connections critical for innovation and growth between the wider Mediterranean and Asia. Blue Raman, named after India's Nobel laureate in physics, Raman, will connect Europe with India and involves major companies such as Google and Team Sparkle.
Just a few days back, how important a deliverable is this for India and the G20?
Look, the G20, the New Delhi Declaration, and all that the New Delhi Declaration covers are all deliverables. But you know, some deliverables are, you know, by the very nature of the issue, come in small doses. Other deliverables are concrete, straight up front. So I don't want to draw comparisons because comparisons at the best of time will be odious. But let me tell you, the Global Biofuels Alliance is very special because it brings countries together, those who are producers of biofuels, those who are consumers, those who are interested in international standards and specifications, technical issues, and those who are interested in encouraging biofuels from the point of view of facilitating and accelerating the journey towards net zero. So the very fact that biofuels have been around for a long time. I was ambassador to Brazil between 2006 and 8, and I used to deal with Unica. Unica is one of the, it's a cooperative society which deals with biofuels production. And I've been dealing with them for the last, you know, since 2006. But I never thought, even then, we always had the ambition, we have always had the desire that we should move towards an international arrangement. The Brazilians in 2006 used to tell me that, look, if India comes with us and along with the United States, we could have an international arrangement. But India's biofuel production till 2014 was only about 1.5%. Right. And that also, we wanted 5% in some of our states and union territories. We couldn't get beyond 1.5%. Right. Today, against a target of 10% by November 2022, you did it 5 months in advance. You did 10%. Today you have a target of 20% biofuels blending for 2030. You're going to do it by 2025. Right. And I can tell you, it's an idea whose time has come. Mm-hmm. It's an idea which is being implemented, and whether it is the automobile manufacturers who will provide flexi-fuel engines, whether it is the producers of agricultural products, but more than that, look at the technological advance. Your second generation ethanol plants are going to be made from agricultural waste or parali. You know, instead of burning the thing and toxicity being produced and all of us not being able to breathe in Delhi, today you will have a situation where that will help produce ethanol, then compressed biogas, all these. So it's a very major development, and I think the full impact of it. Look, I don't think we should celebrate anything till it's finally done. Well, I can tell you, I've been a proponent of the idea for the last 20 years. And I can tell you, I see tremendous potential. And what I see more than that, it's something that people are waiting through. So it's no surprise that the heads of state and government of these countries joined our Prime Minister in order to welcome and initiate the event.
But how will this drive the agenda of greater adoption of biofuels across the world, ethanol blended fuel? How do you think this will drive the agenda? What will be the pillars of this alliance going forward?
Well, I think the answer is very simple. The answer actually comes from the fact that you make an assessment, what is the nature of the biofuels market today? According to the IEA, the International Energy Association, the biofuels market today is about $92 billion, less than $100 billion. But it is expected by 2030 to go up to $192 billion. So, I mean, kaha $92 billion and kaha $192 billion. Now, who will want to drive this forward? There are those who have the capacity. I mean, if you are a country which has natural resources, natural endowments, you have land, you have sunshine, you can grow crops, you can have biomass, you can make it from agricultural waste, you can make it from bamboo as in India. So once that consciousness starts permeating through, you see, people are just used to the idea of biofuels being a small part. They're used to the idea of fossil fuels. And frankly, fossil fuels are the mainstay. But you try to go into alternate forms of energy, you try to go into nuclear energy, you ran into some problems there. There are issues relating to, safeguards, safety of reactors, etc. But more than that, today in biofuels, I don't think you have those impediments. In India, the biofuel plants are all made indigenously. They are Atmanirbharta, they are full. And even the third generation plant we're doing is with some technological collaboration. But this can be an entire homegrown win-win for our agriculture sector, for our fuel sector. And it's not just this, compressed biogas, satat plants, etc. So this is a story which I think is not only unfolding, but I think, as I said, I think the moment has arrived.
Sir, the fact that India and the emerging markets could build consensus on the wording of the Ukraine-Russia war, what does this say about India's maneuvering capability on the G20 table?
I have been a diplomat for 39 years. By diplomat, I mean I was a foreign service officer. I was a grade 1 ambassador for God knows how many years. I have never doubted India's diplomatic acumen or the professionalism of my young colleagues. So I never had any doubts. Insofar as the rest of this whole declaration, read it. I mean, it has stuff in it on climate. It has stuff in it on digital infrastructure. It has stuff on it on health. So I think the whole value, it'll be remembered. The New Delhi Declaration is going to be remembered because this is a solid piece of advancement. Now, when the executive heads of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Japan, Canada, Brazil, they all get together and they have unanimously adopted this. So I think the moment is one of quiet satisfaction, celebration and rejoicing. But as I said, the G20 was born in a moment of crisis. Today you're facing such a crisis. And the fact that an Indian presidency can address those multiple crises wherever they are, I think we should step back and thank all involved for having pulled this off.
And finally, sir, there has been an infrastructure corridor announced between India, Europe and the Gulf. How important do you think is that?
Everything is very important, including, but I'll have to seek your understanding. I have a line of my young friends
Mr.
here.
Puri, thank you so much for speaking to us.